we had a chat about this first thing this morning, and we were toying, as it were, that reshuffles and forming governments, right from the very top, right down to the lowest of the low, are things of art and things of science.
Absolutely.
How do you think he's done?
Well, I think on the face of it, he's done really, really well, because there are so many different things that he had to balance. Of course, he kept talking about party unity, which is hugely important, but then he also had to balance age and youth, for example. He's got to balance the loyalists to him and the people he didn't want to bring only his loyalists over, because then he's got a problem of party unity again. And he's also got
which Liz Truss herself was very much seen to have done.
Exactly.
If you don't love me, you can't play.
Exactly. And perhaps the most significant thing, really, is he was very serious about getting real talent into the cabinet. And we haven't seen that for quite a long time. I think for the past two Prime Ministers at least, there's been a bit of a feeling around Westminster that there's a charmocracy going, and that some of the ministers there are there because they wouldn't really get promoted under anyone else. Whisper it. And so they've got an incentive to sort of keep quiet and toe the party line. Whereas Rishi Sunak's new cabinet is filled, as you say, from the very top to the very bottom, with people who have disagreed dramatically with Sunak, who've disagreed with lots of other prime ministers who've been serial rebels. And I was picking out a few of them. You mentioned there James Cleverly, who obviously said that he was wanted to back Boris Johnson. Ben Wallace, who also said he was leaning towards Boris Johnson. Braverman, of course. But then in the lower rungs of government, you've got someone like Steve Baker, who is a militant libertarian, who calls himself on the left on social issues, but a huge free marketeer. He was naturally...
Although buddies in the dim and distant past over Brexit.
Buddies in the dim and distant past over Brexit, very true. But, huge Truss supporter, and very, very different from someone like, for example, Jessie Norman, who Rishi Sunak has also promoted. Jessie Norman is known in the Conservative Party for being a huge brain and for not being one to toe the party line. He rose to prominence, for example, for abstaining on a very important vote on Syria. He's really not thought of as a kind of party man particularly. He's just a very clever person, written a book on Burke, knows exactly what he's talking about, knows where he's coming from, but not a kind of natural ministerial appointment necessarily. Couple of other ones, Robert Halfon, who is he's in the Department of Education, but he's been leading the Select Committee on Education, and he's been a huge thorn in the previous government's side. He's been talking relentlessly, I used to commission him at the Telegraph actually, but he's been talking relentlessly about how children have been let down as a result of lockdown and that school had become an optional extra. He's been talking about those ghost children, those children who haven't got back into school.
Oh, and also, I mean, I've interviewed him many times at the weekend because I like you. I rate him as a brilliant chair of a select committee. But when Kevin Collins came out and said, if you really want kids in schools to catch up in the state sector in the same way that the private sector has done so well, you're going to have to spend about 15 billion. It was Rishi as Chancellor who said, no way, you can have 5 billion. And Halfon put a huge boot into him weekend after weekend after weekend.
Absolutely.
He's now Minister of State in the Department for Education.
Yes, and along similar lines, you've got Andrew Mitchell, who is well known for his stance on foreign aid. He's always wanting to up Britain's foreign aid budget. And he led a rebellion against Sunak as Chancellor when Sunak was threatening to put the level of foreign aid spending down temporarily over the COVID pandemic. So to bring someone like that in from the fold shows that Sunak is very, very committed, not just to party unity, but having a government of genuinely all the talents and from hearing from all sorts of different viewpoints.